Well, there's no guarantees with football. I mean, you can try taking a football back and complain, but it's very rare to get a
foul. Yellow card. Penalty.
Kickoff.
In the 1980s, I fell in love with two things: football and video games. In the years that followed, I've played pretty much every football game I could get my hands on. From the purity of sensible soccer to the arcade joy of Virtua Striker or the innovative Pro Evo series. In this documentary, I will chart a course through time showcasing the key football games that have brought the beautiful game to our home consoles and PCs. For me, the journey started on the 9th of April 1985. Everton were top of the league, Gary Lineker was headed for the Golden Boot, and a game called Soccer was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Soccer was developed by Intelligent Systems and was a primitive game in many ways. Despite its basic presentation and limited gameplay, it was my first foray into football video games, but it would not be my last. 4 years later, in 1989, Arsenal won their first league title in 18 years. The title was secured on a dramatic night at Anfield as Michael Thomas scored in the dying moments. During the course of the 88-89 season, there were two notable football games released. The first one was Microprose Soccer, released in '88 for the Commodore 64. The game was designed by John Hare and programmed by Chris Yates, and was an adapted version of the previously released arcade game Tekken World Cup. Microprose Soccer features 11-a-side and 6-a-side games, as well as a World Cup tournament. It was a fast and fluid game that would ultimately spawn one of the most iconic football games of all time. In the following year, another fast-paced game was released on the Atari and the Amiga. That game was Kickoff. Kickoff was created by Italian game developer Dino Dini. Matches were viewed from a top-down perspective, but it was the style of play that made Kickoff really stand out. It was an incredibly fast-paced game, some might say too fast, as maintaining control of the ball was nigh on impossible. Regardless, it gave the football game scene a much-needed injection of high-octane action and would go on to win several awards and also inspire many other developers. In the following season, Liverpool were crowned league champions and West Germany, led by Lothar Matthäus, beat Diego Maradona's Argentina to become the world champions in Italia 90. During that season, 3 notable football games were released. Nintendo World Cup was developed by Technos Japan and was a football game with a difference. The rules were the same, but each team was made up of only 6 players. You controlled one player, but could also give commands to your teammates. The game didn't feature offsides or fouls, and this led to some hilarious matches with knocked out players strewn across the turf. The game also adopted super shots, and all in all, it was the first football game that I really fell in love with, mainly due to the atrocious amount of fouling that you could get away with. Visually, the NES version had some similarities to other games in the Kunio-kun series, namely Downtown Neketsu Story and River City Ransom. Interestingly, some visual assets such as Kunio and members of the Japanese team were reused from that game. Tecmo World Cup Soccer was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990. The game was a port of the previously mentioned arcade game Tekken World Cup. Despite being a port of the previously released game, the two versions played quite differently. Despite looking almost identical, it failed to deliver the speed or the fluidity of Tekken World Cup and was quickly forgotten. Football Champ was an arcade football game produced by Japanese developer Team Dogyan. The game featured 8 national teams, star players, and was structurally in keeping with other arcade games, with a winner stays on structure. One thing to note, this was another early example of arcade football games allowing players to use violent moves on their opponents, with punches, flying kicks, and even the ability to pull players' shirts. In the following season, Arsenal were crowned English League champions, with Alan Smith winning the Golden Boot with 22 league goals. That season also saw the release of a new football game for the Super Nintendo. That game was Super Soccer. Super Soccer was developed by Human Entertainment for the SNES. It presented the action from a different perspective to other football games at the time. Super Soccer used a vertical camera angle which added a fresh feel, and it also helped players use the in-game curling system to bend long-range shots into the top corner. I remember Super Soccer fondly. For me, at the time, it was the peak football game experience that I had had to date. But that would all change in the following season. In the 91-92 season, Leeds United were crowned league champions in the last campaign before the creation of the English Premier League. During that season, Gary Lineker was voted FWA Footballer of the Year after scoring 35 goals in all competitions. It was his last season in England before joining the Japanese J-League side Nagoya Grampus 8. That season saw a bumper crop of new football games. But what had caused such a large increase? Well, as I mentioned, it was the year before the formation of the English Premier League as seen on Sky Sports, but I would say it was mainly due to the success of the Italian World Cup in 1990. The 80s had been a dark time for football, with hooliganism and stadium disasters taking the shine off the beautiful game. But Italia 90 was a pure festival of football and immeasurably boosted global interest in the game. The most notable new game that season was Sensible Soccer, which was released on the Amiga and Atari ST in 1992. Sensible Soccer was developed by Sensible Software and once more saw John Hare and Chris Yates of Microprose Soccer fame team up to create a remarkable game. The action took place from a bird's eye view, with tiny players running around at great speed, in a similar vein to Dino Dini's Kickoff. But Sensible Soccer managed to perfect the formula with fast-paced, challenging and creative gameplay. Players had the ability to manually control both passing and shooting, but the pure masterstroke was the inclusion of an after-touch system. This basically allowed players to curl or lift the ball. Once mastered, it led to some glorious moments and some of the best goals you could ever score in a football game. The game wasn't just fun to play, it also had an extensive amount of national teams, club sides and custom teams too. These could all be edited, and it sparked the first fire in many future game modders as they recreated famous teams of the past, updated the current rosters, or just replicated their Sunday League team of cloggers. In the same season came a new arcade football game that would spawn a series. That game was Super Sidekicks. Super Sidekicks was developed by SNK and was released for the Neo Geo MVS. It adopted a pure arcade type of gameplay with a minimal 2-button control system. At the time, it was praised for its graphical presentation and fast gameplay, but was also criticised for its limited controls and lacking tactical depth. Striker, also known as Eric Cantona Football Challenge, was developed by Rage Software and released on multiple platforms in '92. Striker was one of the first football games to use a 3D viewpoint, and it was a fast-paced game with a vertical camera angle. My memory of Striker was a chaotic one: quick passing, long-range shots, and hitting the woodwork 100 times a match. The game received a mixed response from critics, but it ended up selling 700,000 copies in its first 3 years. European club soccer, known as J-League Champions Soccer in Japan, was released in '92 and developed by Chrysalis Software. The game had a minimal arcade control system as well as a variety of game modes to take part in. It featured 170 European club sides with the correct names, but sadly the players were not authentic. In the 92-93 season, Manchester United won the inaugural Premier League title. The Golden Boot was won by Teddy Sheringham, who played for both Nottingham Forest and Tottenham Hotspur during that season. It also saw the boom in popularity of football games continue with 4 notable releases. FIFA International Soccer was developed by EA Canada's Play production team and published by EA Sports. The game was presented from an isometric camera angle and felt different to other games of the era. It had a fine balance between arcade fun but also a degree of simulation which sat well with both critics and players alike. It featured a variety of game modes and had a reasonably good commentary, with Tony Gubba leading the way. With its smooth animation, realistic crowd effects and high quality presentation, it raised the bar in many areas. FIFA was a financial success and became the best-selling home video game of 1993 in the United Kingdom. The public response was not all positive though. Many players cited button lag and a lack of responsiveness to the controls. Another interesting issue was that the game featured a glitch where if you stood in front of the opposing goalkeeper, you could steal the ball and score a tap-in. It was a move that caused controversy and strained the relationships of many friends around the world. You dirty, bloody cheats, you know who you are. The next game is one you've probably never heard of, as it fell under the radar for many football game fans. That game was AWS Pro Moves Soccer. Pro Moves Soccer was developed by Danish studio BGS Developments and Zat Productions. On first appearance, it resembles games such as Kickoff and Sensible Soccer. It featured a team editor, varied game modes and some high-octane action. In fact, at times it captured a nice balance between both Sensi and Kickoff, and on occasions it seemed as though your players could accelerate to almost superhuman speeds. One reason it may have failed to garner public attention was due to it being based on a fictional sports league called ASCIIWare. Pro Move Soccer is often overlooked as a trivial football game, but one aspect that I fondly remember was the wonderful soundtrack created by Jesper Kyd. Jesper Kyd went on to create a number of iconic gaming soundtracks such as Hitman, Assassin's Creed, Freedom Fighters, and many other top-tier video games. Another game released that season was On the Ball. On the Ball is a football management game developed by German developers Ascaron. The game was first released in Germany and focused on the Bundesliga, but due to its popularity, an English league version was then released. The game sees you select your players, run a stadium, and take care of transfer dealings. The matches take place in either text format or with some imagery, and the game was an early example of football management games starting to gain popularity. The last game of note released that season was based on the World Cup in America. World Cup USA 94, developed by T-Rex, was the final FIFA World Cup game before Electronic Arts acquired the rights. Gameplay was viewed from a bird's eye perspective, and it featured a variety of international teams. For me, it wasn't a game that lived long in the memory, but at least it allowed players to play the '94 World Cup. Just before the following season, Roy Keane became the most expensive footballer signed by an English club. The Irish midfielder joined Manchester United for a fee of £3.75 million. In the season that followed, Manchester United repeated their Premier League success by retaining the title. Andy Cole won the Golden Boot with 34 goals for Newcastle United, and another 5 football games drew the attention of the video game community. The most notable game released that season was the iconic Sensible World of Soccer. Once more, it was developed by Sensible Software, known for other successful games such as Cannon Fodder. Sensible World of Soccer was a sequel to their '92 release and included current season data from all around the world. Remarkably, the game featured 1,500 teams and 27,000 players. Although the gameplay remained virtually identical to the previous Sensi, it was the sheer depth of the game modes, the team customization, and the creative gameplay that made this sequel one of the greatest football games of all time. A vast array of critics agreed, and I remember at the time it was spoken about in fond terms by both gamers and football fans alike. The thing that set the game apart was the career mode. It was way ahead of its time and allowed players to play through 20 seasons with the club of their choice. You could buy and sell players as well as create your own formations and tactics. Each player had unique skill ratings such as speed, tackling, passing and shooting. It was a budding football manager's dream, marrying both exciting and compelling gameplay with the strategic element of dealing with player transfers and tactics. For me, it was an iconic game that takes me back to those after-school gaming sessions, going round my friend's house as his mum prepared the dinner in the background. The good old days. In what proved to be a golden year for football games, the next entry was another cracker. International Superstar Soccer was developed by Konami for the Super Nintendo. It was the first title in the ISS series and sold over 500,000 copies. It may not have had the polish of the later Konami football games, but it showed the potential that would ultimately be fulfilled in later years. The next game was Super Sidekicks 2: The World Championship. The game was developed by SNK and it continued the arcade style of the original. It now used a 3-button control system and could be played in versus matches or against AI opponents. In general, it was seen as a big step forward from Super Sidekicks in terms of the gameplay itself. Next came Dino Dini Soccer, released in 1993. It was essentially Kickoff 3 and introduced improved dynamics and some new camera angles. FIFA Soccer 95 was published by EA Sports in 94. It was a direct sequel to FIFA International Soccer and EA's second game in their ongoing series. Once more, it utilised an isometric view, but hadn't changed a great deal from the previous title. One big change was the inclusion of club sides for the first time. It featured clubs from England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain and the Netherlands. Interestingly, there were also Brazilian teams and some based in the US, although the player names were not official. One final extra feature was the inclusion of penalty shootouts, as the first game adopted a next goal wins system. In the season that followed, Blackburn Rovers won the Premier League title for the first time, following an influx of big money signings including the manager and Liverpool legend Kenny Dalglish. Blackburn Rovers had a deadly front two made up of Chris Sutton and the eventual Golden Boot winner Alan Shearer. Shearer scored a whopping 35 goals that season. It was also another bumper season for football game gems, with a couple of new franchises that would go on to become cult classics. Virtua Striker was a football game developed by Sega for the arcades. This first instalment was released in '94 and used revolutionary 3D graphic and texture mapping. It was promoted by Sega as the first 3-dimensional computer graphic football game. Virtua Striker is a unique game in many ways. Gameplay was arcade in style and it was a very challenging game to retain control of the ball. It felt like you were playing with a hot potato, and moving the ball quickly and getting off snapshots was the key to success. And let me tell you, when you scored in Virtua Striker, it was complete ecstasy, mainly due to the ridiculously over-the-top goal commentator. The game used a simple 3-button control system where you could do low passing, shooting or high passing. It was simple, it was challenging, and also one of the purest goal scoring experiences in any video game before or since. Actual Soccer was developed by Gremlin Interactive for MS-DOS, PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. The game could be played from a variety of camera angles and had a nice balance between speed and control. You could play as international teams or clubs, and it also had a fantastic dribbling system that could lead to Maradona-esque moments. Players could create their own teams, customise kits and take part in several game modes. Actual Soccer was also the first video game to feature a fully 3D graphics engine. Real player movements were created using motion capture technology, and it added a real sense of realism to the overall experience.
Motion capture has to be covered in small reflective markers. They then can do their movements inside an area surrounded by 6 cameras. The cameras record the images of the markers, and then the computer converts that into 3-dimensional movement.
Finally, it featured some of the best commentary at the time, with Barry Davis' dulcet tones accompanying the action. Sega Worldwide Soccer was a football game developed by Sega for the Saturn. It may not have featured official content, but it had the capacity to edit the names. In terms of gameplay, it was one of the top rated football games at the time. The following season saw Manchester United once more win the Premier League title, pipping Newcastle United to the crown. Newcastle United's Les Ferdinand won PFA Player of the Year, and Blackburn Rovers striker Alan Shearer won the Golden Boot with 31 goals. That season also saw a couple of notable football games released. Captain Tsubasa Get in the Tomorrow is a Japanese football experience developed by Bandai for the PlayStation. Captain Tsubasa was a football game with a difference. It featured a story mode where the action followed a character through a narrative that was based on an anime series in Japan. It sees you play for Japan and work your way through tournaments and other scenarios. The Captain Tsubasa games is an acquired taste, and it gained most of its success in Japan, with it never really taking off outside of its own country of origin. FIFA Soccer 96 was the next instalment in the EA Sports franchise. It was released for the console market and was marketed as a next-generation soccer title. It was the first FIFA game to use real-time 3D graphics. Another landmark for EA Sports was reached, as this version used real player names, a transfer system, and team customization tools. In the following season, Manchester United won the Premier League title. Alan Shearer won the Golden Boot with 25 goals, and Middlesbrough's Brazilian playmaker Juninho was awarded Premier League Player of the Season. During that season, several game franchises continued to gather pace and grow, but we also saw some unique additions to the game genre as well. One of those unique football games was Libero Grande. Libero Grande was developed by Namco for the arcades, but it was the style of play that made it stand out from the crowd. It used an innovative approach by allowing players to play the entire game as one player. The camera angle reflected this unique approach as the action unfolded from a third-person perspective. It was a completely different experience to any other football game at the time. Instead of controlling the whole team, you had to work with your team, and this gave you a deeper appreciation for teamwork and tactics. The idea of controlling a solitary player didn't inspire many other developers to follow suit, but Japanese developer Konami did use a similar system in their Pro Evo series in Become a Legend mode in later years. Another new release was Virtua Striker 2, developed and published by Sega for the arcades in '97. The arcade release was a huge success in Japan, where it became the second highest grossing arcade game in 1998. Globally, it did have a mixed response though, in particular the Dreamcast version. However, from my perspective, I thought Virtua Striker 2 did one thing remarkably well. It accurately captured the ecstasy of scoring a worldie with fantastic long-range shooting, realistic aftertouch, and it all was topped off by the best goal commentator in the history of video games. One final quirk of Virtua Striker from my experience was, for some reason, I could only ever win the World Cup during sunset. You see, the game used a real-time day-night cycle, so the real time of day would dictate the surroundings. For some unknown reason, I could not win the World Cup during the day, or even the night time. But after coming home from a busy day, turning on the Dreamcast, my team suddenly turned into world beaters. Get in there. Next came FIFA Road to World Cup '98, developed by EA Canada. It was the fifth FIFA game produced by EA and was well received by critics. Some of the features included an official soundtrack, 16 stadiums, 172 official FIFA teams, and a Road to the World Cup mode. In the following season, Arsenal won the Premier League title during Arsene Wenger's first full season in charge. Interestingly, Arsene Wenger was the first manager from outside the British Isles to win the English League title. The Golden Boot was shared between Coventry City's Dion Dublin, Liverpool's Michael Owen and Blackburn Rovers' Chris Sutton. All three strikers scored 18 goals that season. J-League Dynamite Soccer 64 may not be a game Westerners are familiar with, but for anyone who imported games back in the day like me, it was a surprisingly good football adaptation for the N64. As the name suggests, it was focused on the Japanese J-League and was made primarily for the Japanese market. In terms of gameplay, it was a slower type of experience, reminiscent of games such as Super Soccer on the SNES. Next came Actua Soccer 2, developed and published by Gremlin Interactive for PlayStation and Windows. Actua Soccer 2 continued the solid groundwork of the original by adding the full Italian Serie A league as well as a new scenario mode. Another inclusion was the ability to create 128 custom teams. Barry Davis was joined on the comms by Trevor Brooking, and the Welsh rock band Super Furry Animals provided the menu music. The next game had a more jovial British sense of humour when capturing the beautiful game. That game was All Star Soccer. All Star Soccer was developed and published by Eidos Interactive, one of the premier game developers of the time. The game adopted a tongue-in-cheek approach to presentation with cartoon-style players and some wonderfully humorous commentary by Alistair McGowan impersonating such legends as Des Lynam, Alan Hansen and many more.
Tell you what, there's only one man who's covered every blade of grass out there today. That was the groundsman when he mowed this pitch before kick-off.
Well, you know, so far it has been a very exciting game of...
Oh, it's a goal! Well, the England manager is in the crowd today taking a look at some of these players, and I don't know why he's bothering, quite frankly.
In terms of gameplay, it was a hybrid of sorts. It had a simple control system with low passes, medium kicks, high kicks, with the latter two being used for some delicious goals. The aftertouch was incredible too, and to this day, it's still one of the best games for scoring long-range strikes. The overall control system may have been awkward, but the sheer joy when you got it right happily made up for its shortcomings. One final feature was the amazing customization mode, which allowed you to create a bunch of teams from scratch. From the kit designs, player likenesses, and even the colour of their boots. You could even assign stars to their stats, and at the time, it was one of the most enjoyable edit modes in any football game. Viva Football, or Viva Soccer in North America, was a football sim developed by Crimson Studio. One impressive feature of Viva was the inclusion of every international team to play the FIFA World Cup and their qualifiers between 1958 and 1998. This amounted to over 1,000 teams and 16,000 players. In terms of pure gameplay, it may not have been a classic, but the ability to play through any World Cup campaign from 58 to 98 was truly remarkable and something I think we'd all love to see in modern football releases. In the following 98-99 season, Manchester United won the Premier League, pipping Arsenal to the title by 1 point. The Golden Boot was once more shared between several players. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank of Leeds United, Michael Owen of Liverpool and Dwight York of Manchester United all amassed 18 goals that season. During the season, another 5 notable football games were released. LMA Manager was a football management game developed by Codemasters. It was created primarily for the console market, and with that in mind had simple and user-friendly controls and interface so you could use it with a controller. LMA Manager differed from Football Manager by using a fully 3D match engine. It allowed players to manage the team, tactics, strategy and other transfer dealings. You could also shout out commands in real time during the match, with a view to making the right tactical shifts to turn the momentum in your favour. Probably the best football game released that season was ISS Pro Evolution, developed by Konami. It was the 3rd game in the ISS Pro series. Next came Actua Soccer 3, released in 1998. The game featured club teams and national teams and continued the good work of the previous games in the series. One big change saw Trevor Brooking replaced by Martin O'Neill in the commentary booth as he teamed up with Barry Davis for some excellent comms. Another release that season was This Is Football, developed by Sony Computer Entertainment for the PlayStation. The game was only released in Europe and included 30,000 real-life players. Commentary was provided by Clive Tilsley, and the game had some visual similarities to the Actua Soccer series with pretty smooth graphics. But a lack of gameplay depth meant it failed and didn't really make a dent in the market. Sega Worldwide Soccer was first launched on the Sega Saturn, with a future release on the Sega Dreamcast. It featured a wide array of leagues and several tournaments to take part in. It had challenging gameplay, impressive graphics for the time, and opted for a balanced approach between arcade and realism. In the following season, Manchester United won the Premier League once more, beating Arsenal to the prize. Sunderland striker Kevin Phillips won the Golden Boot with 30 goals, and Roy Keane of Manchester United won PFA Player of the Year. One notable football game that came out during that season was ISS Pro Evolution 2. ISS Pro Evo 2 was developed by Konami for the PlayStation and was the 4th game in the ISS series. But it wasn't just superficial elements that had improved. The gameplay was a great deal smoother than the previous installment, with a more realistic visual feel as well. In the following season, Manchester United won their 3rd Premier League title in a row. The Golden Boot was won by Chelsea striker Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank with 23 goals, and during this season there were 2 notable football games released. Virtua Striker 3 was released for Sega hardware in 2001. The game adopted the same approach to the previous games in the series, using an arcade style of gameplay and limited control options. For fans of the series, it was hard to differentiate any substantial gameplay differences from Virtua Striker 2. But with that second installment being released for the Dreamcast, a console that ultimately failed, it never really caught the public's imagination. This 3rd installment did reach a bigger audience because it appeared on the Nintendo GameCube. European Super League was developed by Crimson and Coyote Developments. The game featured 16 licensed European club sides such as AC Milan, Barcelona and Liverpool. It featured 2 control methods, with one opting for more arcade simplicity and the other adding more freedom and control. In the following season, Arsenal broke Manchester United's dominance and secured the Premier League title. Thierry Henry won the Golden Boot with 24 goals, and a select few football games were also released during that season. The first game of note was Pro Evolution Soccer, developed by Konami. The game was also known as World Soccer Winning 11-5 in Japan, but was affectionately known as PES in the European audience. The game was a breath of fresh air and continued the good work Konami had started with their ISS series. The critics agreed with those sentiments, and the Metacritic score was overwhelmingly positive with 93 out of 100. From the subtle yet lifelike graphics to the smooth controls, satisfying gameplay and wonderful array of game modes and edit options. All those things, for me personally, made it one of the greatest football games of all time, and it was right up there with the likes of Sensible Soccer as a game myself and my friends played to death. The next game was Red Card Soccer. Red Card Soccer allowed players to use heavy tackles and special moves to gain the upper hand. Despite the name and aggressive tackling, the game never really took off in Europe and ultimately was deemed as a failure. Possibly the most controversial game in this documentary was released in 2002. That game was Hooligans Storm Over Europe. Hooligans was a real-time strategy game developed by Dark Saber. The story takes place during a football season, with your objective being to lead a group of football hooligans across Europe as you kill, maim and eliminate rival hooligan firms. The game also featured a mockumentary of sorts, where a former hooligan turned reporter follows a Dutch firm on a tour across Europe. But in order to access this mockumentary, players needed to injure and kill every opposing hooligan gang. To say Hooligans was badly received was an understatement, and it quickly became not only controversial but also banned in most countries. Despite it being in poor taste, it did offer some interesting, shall we say, tactical elements, such as using items such as illegal drugs and alcohol to boost your gang. If you stopped feeding them these substances, the gang members would become more peaceful. The Dutch developers vehemently defended the title, stating it rewarded strategic thinking rather than violence. But due to its poorly toned content, it received an 18 rating, with the ELSPA stating, "Hooligans is not a game with which the UK games industry wishes to be associated, and we regard it as an unfortunate event that it has obtained distribution here." In the following season, Manchester United won the Premier League, with their star striker Ruud van Nistelrooy winning the Golden Boot, scoring 25 goals. The most notable football game released that season was Pro Evolution Soccer 2. PES 2 was the next instalment in Konami's series and featured 6 game modes, including the ever popular Master League. The game featured 40 unlicensed clubs and 56 unlicensed national teams. It was a steady progression from PES 1 and continued to offer creative gamers the option of customizing the unofficial content. This lack of licensing and the ability to customize was a good feature for a lot of gamers, but it was a feature that Konami later over-relied on in their battle with FIFA, which was continuing to grow in mainstream popularity at the time. In the season that followed, Arsenal won the Premier League title in their famous Invincible League season. Thierry Henry won the Golden Boot with 30 goals, and the PES series released their next and possibly their greatest version to date. PES 3 from Konami had the iconic referee Pier Luigi Collina on the cover. This edition took all the best parts of the PES series to date and made for a truly memorable and captivating football experience. But featuring a referee on the cover was a strange choice because at the time, referees were at their lowest level of popularity due to the increase in television analysis and tribalism in the game. Pro Evo 3 utilised a new graphic engine and featured improved gameplay, sharper controls, better ball physics, slicker animation and AI improvements. It also added a new shop mode where you could spend accumulated points on hidden items. The Master League was expanded to 4 divisions with a huge range of new players and support for 1 to 4 players. Again, it lacked the official licenses to appeal to everyone, but the edit mode allowed modding, and for football purists it is still regarded as one of the greatest football games of all time. In the following season, Chelsea won their first Premier League era title in Jose Mourinho's first year in charge. Arsenal's Thierry Henry once more won the Golden Boot with 25 goals, and that season saw another 2 football games released of note. Football Manager 2005, also known as Worldwide Soccer Manager, was a football management sim that fed the need of gamers who saw themselves as a budding Alex Ferguson. The game was developed by Sports Interactive and was followed by a series of football management games over the years. When compared to the management sims of today, it perhaps wasn't as comprehensive, but it gave football fans the opportunity to create a team in their image and try to take their club to glory. The second major release that year was Pro Evolution Soccer 4. PES 4 was another advancement of Konami's cult football hit that had grown in popularity over the years with the modding community in particular, but also any gamers who wanted to customize or create their own teams. Interestingly enough, this was the first Pro Evo to appear on Xbox. Despite coming to Xbox, the relationship between PES fans and Xbox did become fraught in later years because they were never able to mod the game in the way that, say, PC gamers could or PlayStation owners could. Some notable features of PES 4 were an expanded Master League, retirement of Master League players and a fully licensed Serie A, Eredivisie and La Liga. Another new feature was the inclusion of on-field referees for the first time. The edit mode had also been tweaked, allowing players to alter league names and, more importantly, add text on the kits, meaning that if you were creative, you could attempt to create sponsorship logos to make all the strips look more authentic. In the 05-06 season, Chelsea won their second straight Premier League title under the stewardship of the special one, Jose Mourinho. The Golden Boot was awarded to Premier League legend Thierry Henry with 27 goals. There were also 2 major games released that year that I personally loved. The first game that season that piqued my interest was Super Mario Strikers. The game was developed by Next Level Games and published by Nintendo for the GameCube. For me, Super Mario Strikers is one of the purest, most entertaining and enjoyable arcade football games of all time. With its fluid passing, slick skills and wonderful array of crazy goals that you could score, making it just a joy to play. But for a Nintendo game, it was actually quite surprising how brutal the tackling could be. It ended up resembling a game of Speedball 2 at times, with pure violence on the pitch. It has to be, for me personally, one of the best football games that I've ever played. Here are some memorable moments. Much like in Mario Kart, you had a variety of Mario-themed leagues to compete in, various stadiums, star players, team players that you could select. Now, in recent years, the series may have gone down the toilet, but this version, it is a true classic, and if you've never played it, my word, I wholeheartedly recommend that you do. Another big release that season was Pro Evo Soccer 5. Sadly, it was the last version to feature the German Bundesliga as an officially licensed product, But it was also the first PES to appear on the PSP handheld console, as well as being the first game in the series to fully feature online play. In the 06-07 season, Manchester United won the Premier League title and Didier Drogba claimed the Golden Boot with 20 goals. For me, the biggest release that season was what some people claim to be the greatest football game of all time. That game was Pro Evolution Soccer 6. But what made PES 6 such a standout in what had become a bloated video game genre? Well, even now, playing PES 6 is an absolute pleasure. Creating the perfect football video game, it's always been a very delicate balance between realism and arcade entertainment. PES 6 walked that line perfectly with an incredibly smooth and responsive feel in relation to the passing, the shooting, but also how the tactical manoeuvres unfolded. Some of the goals you could score left a huge smile on your face, and it was a football game for the ages and one the purists will talk about for decades to come. Another feature that proved popular was PES Shop. Here you could buy unusual costumes for your teams like a raptor or an ostrich outfit. There were legendary players that could be unlocked, as well as new hairstyles, goal celebrations and new stadiums too. The next notable release that season was LMA Manager 2007. LMA was an interesting managerial game that I personally really enjoyed, in part because you and a friend could actually manage your own team and compete over the career mode together. I'll never forget my AC Milan team playing Catenaccio against my friend's stylish and elegant Real Betis team as we met in the Champions League, and I just fouled the hell out of him and hoofed it to glory. Sadly, this version proved to be the death knell in the franchise, as the PC versions had some issues with Windows Vista and Windows 7. Adding to that, there was also the growth in popularity of the Football Manager series, but LMA Manager, it will always hold a special place in my heart, in my gaming memories, if only just for rubbing my mate's face in it as I played like 80s Wimbledon, chucking it in the mixer, son. Go Lazzo! In the 2007-2008 season, Manchester United were crowned Premier League champions and Cristiano Ronaldo won the Golden Boot with an impressive 31 goals. This season marked a crossroads in the history of football video games. Pro Evo left its numbered editions behind and opted for a yearly version between 2008 and 2021. Despite PES being my personal favourite, the majority of the gaming market seemed to prefer FIFA, and the EA franchise continued to assert its dominance over the market, with its realistic presentation, official licensing, and excellent mainstream marketing campaigns and techniques made each edition of the game come out and feel like an event. Regardless of whether the game was actually the best game or not, it was without doubt the most commercially popular and commercially successful. Several years later, in the 11-12 season, Manchester City won the Premier League title and Robin van Persie of Arsenal was awarded the Golden Boot for 30 goals that season. The sheer volume of football games was in decline due to FIFA and PES holding dominance over the market, but there was one FIFA spin-off that did add something interesting for gamers to try. That game was FIFA Street. FIFA Street was technically a reboot for the series and was developed by the team behind FIFA 12. The art style was now more realistic after the cartoon-like presentation of the previous version had been dumped. It was a game more like other wacky sports games such as NBA Jam, more focused on skills and tricks than tactics or serious play. But after this season, the football game market began to stagnate. Aside from the PES and FIFA series, the following years saw a barren spell in terms of football game development, innovation or creative ideas. After the golden years of the 80s and 90s, football fans were left with the fully licensed but dumbed down FIFA franchise or the more complex gameplay of PES minus all of the licensing. Throughout these years, monetization and DLC became more prevalent in the industry, which was also heavily linked to My Team and virtual currency featured in these sorts of games. Ultimately, FIFA's dominance killed off all the competition and left a gaping hole in the market as other developers were afraid to compete in a market so dominated by one company. As the years went by, the end for Konami's PES series was inevitable. With a lack of investment and an over-reliance on the diligent and talented modding community, PES was destined to fall by the wayside. In 2020, PES altered its branding to eFootball PES 2020 and it released a season update version the following year. Sadly, that was the end for Pro Evolution Soccer, with the franchise being pulled from digital stores a year or so after. This coincided with the release of Konami's new free-to-play game eFootball, which I can say is without a doubt one of the worst football games of all time and a complete travesty to the high quality work done by Konami's employees over the years. And that is where we are in the present day. PES is dead, FIFA is now called EAFC, 2K Games are rumoured to be developing a new FIFA game, but it really is a sorry state of affairs. But fear not, because the one thing I've learned over the years is football fans who love video games are a stubborn bunch, and there are a few green shoots of optimism coming through at the moment. Despite PES being no more, that has not stopped the modding community taking the last PES game in the franchise, PES 21, and modding it to death. There are several updated versions available for PC, with some clocking in at around 450 gig in size. Really? But the size is there for a reason though, because they feature updated kits, updated rosters, new stadiums, bespoke TV style camera angles, official licensing, etc. And you know what? It's really impressive to see my colleagues in the modding community having done so much stellar work to keep this beloved franchise alive. However, it does also make me sad to think that we still haven't, after all of these years, we haven't had the seminal football game that we really should have by now. There are a few notable mentions that I should go through, games that have come out in recent years that take a unique perspective on the beautiful game, or have some potential or some things that you might be interested in. Here they are. Rocket League. This is a driving based football game that sounds mad. You play football in a car, but I tell you what, a lot of fun, quite tricky to learn, but really entertaining. Retro Goal is a turn-based game for the Switch and Android. And it sounds strange to have a turn-based football game, but it's a great time killer and it's actually quite satisfying once you get the hang of it. What else? You've got a game called Soccer Story, which has like a narrative path within it. Tiny Football is a bit sort of sensible soccer-esque, as is Super Arcade Football. There's Pixel Cup Soccer and Bang Average Football. All of these have got a sort of arcade style that's all very heavily influenced by games such as Sensible Soccer and the old sort of Super Sidekicks Virtua Striker games. Now, if you're looking for something a bit different or a laugh, why don't you try out a game called Streaker Simulator, which, yes, you play as a streaker. If you fancy yourself as a pitch invader, have a look at that one. As I mentioned earlier, free-to-play football games are all the rage today. Why? Who the hell knows, but you've got UFL, you've got the god-awful eFootball. So yeah, if you want a sort of free My Team mode, those are two you can have a look at. So, that was the history of football video games from a true football fan's perspective. But if I had to create a football team made up of those games, which ones would I choose and why? Okay, so in goal we will play FIFA Street. Why? Well, it's going to be FIFA Street in goal, playing Monkey Rush so they can come out of the goal. Nowadays in football you need a keeper that's good with their feet, someone who's got a few little tricks up their sleeve, so FIFA Street is in goal. Controversial, I know, but What are you going to do? Sue me. At left back, we are playing All-Star Soccer because it's versatile, it's got a good sense of humour, it will be good banter in the dressing room and can also bang some curling crosses in and maybe a 60-yard screamer. We're playing with 2 centre halves, so the first centre half will be FIFA International Soccer for its innovation and the kind of impending doom it imprinted on the industry, as it would assert dominance over everything that would come before it. That's what we want from a centre back. Smash them. The other centre back, controversial partnership, it's Pro Evolution Soccer 3, silky, fluid, great on the ball, the Rio Ferdinand of the 2 centre backs. At right back, we're having Kickoff. Why? Because Kickoff's pace was unbelievable. It'd be up and down the flank all day long. Won't be able to control anything, couldn't control a bag of cement, but it will be up and down, tirelessly working like a robot. Okay, we're playing 4 in midfield, so at left midfield we're going to have Virtuous Striker 2, assuming we're playing the game at sunset, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, only does well at sunset. A bit of a luxury player, can't trap the ball, but you know, it can cross the ball well, and also if it gets a chance to hit one from 40 yards, it will hit a screamer and it will celebrate. Right midfield, we're going to have Pro Evolution Soccer 2016, Pro Evo 2016, very silky, lovely fluid passing, pass and move, can hit a delicately accurate shot from outside the box, very sexy football type player, so that's the right midfield. Now centre mid pairing, you might think I'm going to go for cloggers, I'm not. First one is Libero Grande, why? Because in the sense of the name, Libero, it will be someone who can see the whole pitch. They've got the angles. They're like Xavi. They know what's coming. They know where everybody is. They receive the ball. They give it. They go. No one will get near them. Libero Grande in the centre mid. The other centre mid is Super Mario Strikers, who's a box of tricks. The Adel Tarapt of this team. You know, a liability, but on their day, my goodness, what a player. So we're playing 2 centre forwards. We're going old school 4-4-2. So the 2 centre forwards. On the right hand side, we are having Pro Evolution Soccer 6, one of the greatest games of all time. Polished, clinical, skillful, won't let you down ever. Will be an absolute goal pig. And the other centre forward to go with it, I think we know. And the captain of the team, the leader, Sensible World of Soccer, because Sensible World of Soccer started it all. It's the king, it's the god of the team, and it will set the standards that everybody else will have to abide by. On the bench we'll go for Actra Soccer because it's got a nice animation, it's a very smooth runner. Rocket League because it's a bit of a wild card, you never know what it's going to produce, and Super Soccer because it's got a great curl effect on its shots. And manager, obviously we'll have LMA manager and football manager will be like co-managing the team, fighting over who's going to decide what we play like. So that's my team of video games based on football. What do you think about that? Who would you put in your team? Put that in the comments. Right, to finish off this documentary, it's time for the Football Game Awards. The award for Best Gameplay goes to Pro Evolution Soccer 6 for its smooth and fluid depiction of the beautiful game. The award for Best Graphics goes to the FIFA series for its realistic and accurate representation of not only the game but also the authentic branding and licensing. The award for Best Music in a Football Game goes to Jesper Kid for his stellar work on the underrated AWS Pro Moves Soccer. Best Commentary Award is split between Actua Soccer, All-Star Soccer and the glorious Virtuous Striker 2. The award for Tactics and Management goes to the Football Manager series. In terms of innovation, the award goes to Libero Grande for its refreshing take on how football games can be played from the perspective of one player. The award for Most Controversial Football Game of All Time goes to Hooligans Storm Over Europe. The award for Passing and Shooting goes to Pro Evolution Soccer 2. The official licensing award, without doubt, has to go to FIFA. And finally, the Lifetime Achievement Award goes to one of the most iconic video games of all time, Sensible World of Soccer. And that, my football loving friends, is all she wrote. I hope you found this documentary interesting, informative, entertaining, but also a lovely nostalgic trip down memory lane. Thank you for watching, and before I go, here are a few little highlights of the wonderful football games that I've played through the years. This is Photography Gamer signing off. Thank you.